The Rebecca. In April 1731, a British merchant vessel called the Rebecca was sailing through waters off the coast of Florida when a Spanish Coast Guard ship pulled alongside and ordered it to stop. Captain Robert Jenkins followed standard procedure. He brought his ship to a halt. He allowed the Spanish officers aboard. He cooperated fully with what he assumed would be a routine inspection. The inspection lasted 11 minutes. The Spanish commanding officer, a man recorded in later testimony as Fandino, ordered Jenkins bound to his own mast. His crew watched. No resistance was offered. Fandino then took out a blade, cut off Jenkins' left ear at the base, placed it in the captain's hand, and told him to take it to his king. Jenkins was released. His ship was not damaged. His crew was not harmed. The Spanish vessel pulled away as if nothing requiring documentation had occurred. Jenkins filed a formal complaint with British naval authorities upon returning to port. The complaint was received, recorded, and ignored. Spain denied the account entirely. The matter appeared closed. Jenkins kept the ear, preserved in brine. For 7 years he carried it and filed complaints that nobody with authority read. In 1738 he walked into British Parliament and placed the jar on the table. Parliament voted for war within months. Britain and Spain fought for 9 years. Tens of thousands died. It began in 11 minutes on a ship that was following every rule. The Gaspé. In June 1772, a British customs schooner called the Gaspé ran aground on a sandbar in Narragansett Bay off the coast of Rhode Island while pursuing a suspected smuggler. Its commander, Lieutenant William Dudingston, sent word to the nearest British naval post and waited for assistance. That night, 8 longboats carrying approximately 60 men rowed out from the shore of Providence and surrounded the grounded vessel. Dudingston was shot when he appeared on deck. His crew was removed from the ship at gunpoint and taken to shore. The Gaspé was then set on fire and allowed to burn until it sank into the sandbar where it had grounded. The British government assembled a royal commission. Investigators interviewed dozens of witnesses and operated for months at considerable expense. Not a single colonist provided a name. Not one witness cooperated. The commission identified nothing and no one. Britain responded by announcing that any suspects, if identified, would be transported to London for trial rather than tried in colonial courts. The announcement reached every colony within weeks. What the burning produced was not a legal consequence. It produced the first formal intercolonial committee created specifically to coordinate resistance against British authority. Within 3 years, the colonies were at war. The Gaspé sank in a sandbar. The empire that owned it followed. The USS Philadelphia. In October 1803, an American naval frigate called the USS Philadelphia ran aground on an uncharted reef outside the harbor of Tripoli while blockading the port. Its captain, William Bainbridge, attempted to free the vessel for several hours before Tripolitan gunboats surrounded it completely. Bainbridge made the decision to surrender. He ordered the guns thrown overboard and the hull flooded before Tripolitan forces boarded. 307 American officers and crew were taken prisoner and held inside the city. The Pasha of Tripoli had the Philadelphia refloated, repaired, and positioned in the harbor as a working warship that could now be turned against American vessels. American Naval Commander Edward Preble concluded the ship could not remain in enemy hands. He assigned the mission to a lieutenant named Stephen Decatur. In February 1804, Decatur led a small crew into Tripoli harbor at night aboard a disguised vessel, boarded the Philadelphia, set it on fire, and escaped before Tripolitan forces could respond. The entire operation lasted 22 minutes. The harbor burned for hours. The Philadelphia sank again, permanently. The attack that captured it had been an accident of navigation. What followed was not. The United States fought the First Barbary War for 4 years. Congress authorized a permanent naval force specifically because of what happened on that reef. 307 men were held in Tripoli. The fleet built to recover them outlasted the war by 2 centuries. The USS Chesapeake. In June 1807, an American naval frigate called the USS Chesapeake departed Hampton Roads, Virginia, on a routine assignment to the Mediterranean. It had barely cleared American territorial waters when a British warship called HMS Leopard pulled alongside and signaled it to stop. The British commander demanded the right to search the Chesapeake for Royal Navy deserters. The American commander, James Barron, refused. He was under no legal obligation to submit to search. The Chesapeake was a commissioned vessel of the United States Navy operating in American waters. The Leopard opened fire without further communication. 3 American sailors died. 18 were wounded. The Chesapeake's guns were not loaded for combat. Barron could not return fire meaningfully. He struck his colors after firing a single shot, the minimum required by naval tradition. 4 crew members were removed at gunpoint. 1 was hanged from the yardarm of a British vessel the following year. The account reached American newspapers before Barron's official report reached Washington. President Thomas Jefferson, who had spent years keeping the United States out of European conflicts, described the attack as the gravest crisis since independence. It took 5 years for the war to formally begin. But the decision was made in the waters outside Hampton Roads on a morning when a frigate's guns were not loaded. They were never unloaded again. The Caroline. In December 1837, a small American steamboat called the Caroline was moored on the American side of the Niagara River at Schlosser, New York, when a force of Canadian loyalists and British soldiers crossed the international border at night and boarded it. The Caroline had been supplying Canadian rebels on Navy Island who were attempting an uprising against British rule. American authorities had been informed and had taken no action. The British-led force boarded the Caroline, so the Rebecca Caroline killed at least one American crew member, set the ship on fire, and pushed it into the Niagara River current. It drifted burning toward the falls and broke apart before reaching them. The attack had occurred on American soil, against an American vessel, killing an American citizen. The United States government formally demanded an explanation and the extradition of those responsible. Britain acknowledged the attack but refused extradition, arguing the operation had been a military necessity. American and British forces moved to opposing sides of the border. Militia units assembled on both sides. For several months in early 1838, both governments privately described the situation as a single incident away from open war. The war did not happen. Diplomacy produced an agreement that satisfied neither side. The Caroline burned and broke apart before it reached the falls. The crisis it created came significantly closer to the edge than either government was willing to admit for decades afterward. The USS Panay. In December 1937, an American gunboat called the USS Panay was anchored in the Yangtze River in China, clearly marked with American flags painted on its deck and hull when Japanese aircraft attacked it without warning. The Panay sank in 3 hours. 3 crew members died. 48 were wounded. Japanese aircraft continued firing on survivors in the water after the ship went under. The attack was filmed. A newsreel cameraman named Norman Alley recorded the entire sequence from the deck of the Panay as it was happening. The footage showed the American flags clearly visible from the air at the moment of attack. Japan issued an immediate apology and paid $2.2 million in compensation within weeks. The United States government accepted both. Congressional support for war with Japan reached levels that alarmed President Roosevelt, who had been carefully managing relations with Tokyo. A Gallup poll conducted days after the attack showed 25% of Americans favored immediate military response. Japan continued its expansion. The United States continued its careful management. 4 years later, in December 1941, Japanese aircraft attacked another American target clearly marked with American flags. That attack was also filmed. The response was different. The Panay footage still exists in the National Archives. The flags are clearly visible in every frame. What was accepted in 1937 was not accepted in 1941. The difference between those two responses cost more than anyone had calculated when the first apology was accepted.